Hey, welcome back to ZK Master Tech. Today I'm going to be continuing repairs on an S770 combine. I've been here for 3 days now doing a bunch of repairs on this thing, and I'll catch you guys up to speed. I'll show you what we've already done before. What we're going to get into today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the variable speed drive on the Feederhouse, kind of show you some issues that I run into on these. I've shown it in the past. I've done a complete video on how to completely rebuild this thing, so if you guys want to know more about that, I'll put a link right up here where you guys can go to that video. But I'm going to show you what I ran into on this combine. I hope you guys enjoyed the S780 video that I did. That was a pretty cool combine to get my first reaction to. I did a walkthrough on that, so if you guys haven't seen that video, I'll put a link up here where you guys can check that video out too. It was a really awesome combine. I'm really digging the S7 series combine so far. And I'm really hoping that I'm going to get to go see some more of them at the Farm Progress Show. I will be at the Farm Progress Show August 27th. It's on a Wednesday. I'll be there all day. I'm going to try to walk around and see all the sites, but I will be at the Sloan Express booth. I'll be there to do a meet and greet. I've got a limited supply of merch there that's cash only. I'd be more than welcome to sign that stuff for you guys and take pictures with you guys. So I'd love to meet everybody there. So if you want to come see me, I'll be at the Sloan Express booth. And when it comes closer to time, I'll let you guys know what time I'm going to be in that booth to sell merch and sign and take pictures with you guys and all that stuff. So I'll keep you posted. Don't worry. Okay. So today we're going to get into this Feederhouse drive. Let me show you what I found on this thing. I don't think it would have ran too much longer. I think the upper shivs would have fell off.
It falls off.
So let me bring you to the graveyard of parts I've accumulated so far. So what brought me into this upper variable shiv is I noticed it was leaking grease out the grease seal out here, and this was all wet. So I took it all apart, and then I found this cavity was just dry. See? And it'd been rubbing just metal on metal right there. And when that happens, when you start wearing these teeth here, and then this is the hub that goes in the inner, you can see how these teeth are worn. It's not like super bad, terrible. I've seen this worn to like a sharp point right there before, right? But you got a bearing inside there. It's a sealed bearing. You got a sealed bearing in the other shiv. But it was causing a vibration because it actually cracked the plate that this thing mounts to. So here's the bracket that holds the upper shivs, right? So this will mount right here, okay? And I cleaned this up, and then I seen a big crack. So what will happen is when you get vibration in those shivs, because those teeth in there are worn down and the shivs are allowed to move a lot, it'll cause a vibration to break this. They could actually call this in parts a strap, but it'll break. Sometimes it'll crack in here where the bolts mount, or along here in the gusset. But sometimes it'll crack right here, and I've seen this piece from right here just break off.
It falls off.
So when that breaks off, that's part of that shaft that's those bearings are riding on, the whole entire variable falls off the combine. So I guess it was a good thing we went ahead and took everything apart and found this crack right here. So I've got a new strap that I'm going to put on, and then I replaced the hub. So this hub, this is the grease seal that I suspected was bad, and it did leak out. But this hub is, you don't have to replace this inner shiv. See, this hub bolts onto the back, and then you've got a bearing that you can install in there, okay? And then you've got the outer shiv, but the drive teeth in here are made into the shivs, you see? See how much thicker these are? So if you wear these down, you got to replace the outer shiv and bearing. So we've got new hub. Also, you gotta kind of make sure that the shiv right here where the the belt rides isn't super worn, because you don't want to have a worn shiv here and a new shiv here. It doesn't put equal pressure on that belt, and that could cause some issues there too. But this one still seems okay. It's a little rusty, but once you run it for a while, it rubs that rust right off, so not too worried about that. So we'll put the upper shiv all back together now. And since this one was dry, and it's not because the farmer doesn't grease it, you know, if that grease cavity is empty, you could grease that thing every day, but if you're only greasing it 3-4 pumps like you're supposed to twice a day, that little amount of grease that you put in there is not going to do any good, because that cavity is so large, so it's just going to burn up. Okay, so the farmer could say that he greases it every day, and he's probably telling the truth, but that small amount of grease in an empty cavity is not going to do a thing. So when you suspect you got problems in here, you probably got problems in here too. So I took this up the lower shiv all apart as well, and check the cams and the inner shiv where the cams slide on, and it was pretty decent. Now there was some wear on the inner shiv where the cam had been kind of digging into, lack of lubrication, and that's due to when you have a platform or a draper hooked up, when you grease it, you're supposed to speed the feeder house up and slow it down to distribute that grease. Well, when you actually have a platform hooked up into here, it disables that feature where you can't speed the feeder house up. So when you do have a draper platform, you need to make sure that you take the drive shafts off, unhook the multi-coupler, grease it, and then run the speed up and down to get that grease where it needs to be. Because if you don't, it's running all the way slow all day. So it's all the way in, and that inner cam that's inside here will just eat into this shiv right here. Okay, so, and I have covered that in that other video if you guys want to check that out. So, but all I did was I took this apart, took the cams out of it, cleaned it all up, put new seals in it, re-greased it, put it back together, and slid it back on. So this is all taken care of now. So now all I gotta do is put the upper shivs back together, and then I've got a new upper drive belt too. And then we'll put the variable speed belt on, and I'll show you how it's done. Step 1, install new strap. And you get 3 18mm nuts, hold that on. Now you just want to have them on loosely, because we're going to need to be able to slide this thing back and forth, and that's what slows or speeds up your feeder house. Basically, it sets your low end speed, which is the important thing when you're setting up the feeder house drive. Next step is there's an O-ring that goes on this shaft, and the inner bearing is going to go over that O-ring right there, and that helps seal that grease cavity. And I like to put a little grease on it to give it some lube. All right, now we're going to shove our inner shiv on. So the grease I use on this is the TY 744 extreme duty synthetic grease. So I only use extreme duty synthetic grease in the feeder house drive. Now I did hear through the grapevine that Deere's discontinuing that grease, and whatever's left is left, and I'm sure they're going to have some kind of substitute for it, but I haven't found out yet. So we'll have to wait and see. I'll keep you posted on that. So I'm going to fill this with grease. There goes a tube. Oh, when you got the old Milwaukee grease gun on full auto, you'll run a tube real quick. There, got it full of synthetic. So what I do is I fill it to the edge of the hub all the way around. Okay. We do want to take a little bit of grease and kind of grease our seal, lube it up. Oh, and also a little trick. When I do install this seal, I put Loctite 680 on the outside of it, and then I drive it in and lock it in, because these will have issues with them walking out on you. So I always put some Loctite on there. And then you got to make sure that these teeth right here are going to go in between the teeth on the hub when you go together. So got to get it clocked just right. You got to be careful not to roll the seal. Just kind of wiggle it. Oh, I didn't get it in the right spot. There. See, that's the teeth in between each other there. And then we're going to slide this all the way in. Okay. We'll squeeze it all the way together. And what we want is we want grease all the way up to the hole in this bearing whenever it's squeezed all the way out. So I'm gonna put just a little bit more in there. So it'll almost hold 2 tubes of grease in there. So I'll work it kind of in and out a little bit. What I like about this grease is it liquefies a little better, and you got a lot of centrifugal force in there, so the grease wants to go to the outsides, and then it just goes to the outsides and then gets burnt and gets hard on there. Well, this synthetic grease will stay liquid a little bit more, and it will keep everything lubricated inside there a lot better than any traditional grease will do. So this is what full looks like. See, the grease is clear to the end of the shaft right there. Okay, so now I know that entire grease cavity is full, and that is the only way you can tell if that grease cavity is full. And there's a hydraulic piston that goes right here. You'd have to take the bracket, outside bracket off, pull the piston out, and then look inside there, or just pull the shiv all the way off and then take a look inside. But this is what you want to start the season out as, all the way full. So when you are greasing it daily, you know that it's doing its job and it's staying full. If you start the season with it empty, you have no idea how many pumps of grease to put in there to get it full. You have to get it like this and fill it and sandwich them together and get it to where the grease comes out of this bearing right here. Then you know it's full. Next step, put your belt on, because you can't get the belt on there once you got the piston and the bracket and the hose all the way on. So, you know, if there is a step that I'm gonna forget, it's probably that. So get this is the drive belt, 2-rib belt. We're gonna get it on. Okay. Make sure it's on everywhere. Okay, make sure that belt's installed correctly. Now, we can work on getting our piston into place. So I left this bracket hooked up because there's a push nut holding this bolt and clamp in there, but you can leave it all together, leave it hanging, it's okay. So here's our hydraulic piston. Oh, it's got some poopies on it. Let me give that thing a quick little wipe down here. And also, this piston here can leak out the seals in it, and it can leak hydraulic oil into the shivs, which dilutes the grease, and then it doesn't do its job, and then it gets burned up there too. And that grease seal is not designed to hold back oil, so you might get oil on the belt. So that's something to look out for whenever you're doing this. So this piston has got a 3/4 drive in it, okay? And it threads into here. And you want to make sure you get this started straight. If you do booger up these threads, they are 3/4 16 is the thread size. So you just kind of hold the hose to keep it from spinning. And you're just gonna kind of hand start it with a ratchet. Get it started real good. And it kind of presses itself into the bearing. And once we know it's started good, we can hammer it down. Torqued. Haven't had one come apart yet. This step is crucial, okay? So I'm gonna drive this piston in just a little bit. You see how it's kind of bouncy? But that's just a little bit of hydraulic pressure that's left in that hose. You do want to start this job with the Feederhouse speed all the way down to take all the pressure off this line, okay? You drive that in because the next step is we're going to put these little white plastic shims in here. In the parts book it shows them with this piston, but I like to put 4 of them in there, okay? So 4 is about the max that I'm going to go. And what those are going to do is they're going to act as a cylinder stop. So that cylinder can only retract so far, right? So we'll have more adjustment on our belt to get that low end speed where we need to be, because the way these are, whenever you get them adjusted, when everything's new, you maybe have an inch of adjustment left on here. But if we install these shims in here, we'll have a lot more adjustment to work with, and we'll get a lot more life out of our belt, and we won't struggle with trying to get our Feederhouse speed where it needs to be as much. Once your shims are in there, then you got this big washer that fits inside of this grommet. That's going to keep all the dust and debris out of there. Okay, put that on there. Then we got our big bolt here. And what we're going to do is get that started first. Start it in there. So I'm going to adjust this rod a little bit. I should have slid it just a little bit more that way when I initially put that on there. But these have these 2 nuts that you jam together so you can turn the threaded bolt in here. But what I'm doing now is I'm just lengthening this rod just to make it a little easier to go back together, because once you put the weight of those shivs on that shaft, it's really hard to manually move that bracket back and forth by hand. It's pretty heavy. So I'll just adjust this a little bit. Okay, so I mean, you can start with it clear back here, but I had it slid back. It makes it a little easier to get this upper belt on. It doesn't matter how you do that. Okay, I've got this bolt in loose, I got this bolt in loose, so the next step is we're going to put the little M10 carriage bolts in here. Okay, the nuts go to the inside, but we're not going to tighten them. And the top left one's got that hose clamp. Okay, so we don't have anything tightened up at the moment, okay? Because what you want to do is you want to tighten this one first, and that's going to center this plate to that shaft. We want to try to get everything centered up as possible. We don't want this threaded rod binding this plate in any way, okay? Because you can actually, these holes are slotted, and you can move this bracket and manipulate this, and you can actually change the angle on these shivs here, and you don't want to do that and get it in a bind. You want it to run straight and true. So we'll start with tightening this bolt here. Okay, then you want to make sure all the tension is off of this. So what you can do, if you're not sure that all the tension's off, you can just take this bolt out. Okay, now I know that this is not influencing this piece at all right here. okay? Oh, it is hot in here. I'm in a non-insulated shed. It's about 90 degrees outside. It's hot. And I don't have the fans running right now so you guys can hear what I'm saying. So, sacrificing for you guys. And I'm gonna tighten these up here. Now I know this outer bracket is where it needs to be. It's squared up and centered. Because if you mess up this and you change the shiv angle, it'll change the belt alignment up here on that tensioner, and it won't ride center in the pulley, and it'll jump up on the pulley will ride up on the belt, and it'll rip the belt in half. Okay? You don't want that. So now that those are tightened, we can put our bolt back in here. We can tighten that down. And I have that loose for now. Well, now that we're all the way this way, we need to bring it all the way this way. So I'll just run this in all the way. All right, now I've got this shiv assembly slid all the way this way. So we're gonna put this belt on. Okay. We're just gonna work it on and just roll it on there. Just like that. So the next step that I'm gonna do is we're gonna tighten this upper drive belt here with this tensioner, and I'm actually gonna tighten it to where it's about an inch past the adjustment. We're gonna go way up in here. Okay, I'm gonna get it real tight because as we go backwards, that tension will loosen because we're shifting it this way, okay? And by the time we get done, it'll be right on the money, you watch, okay? So this tension of this belt is gonna help pull this shiv assembly that way, which will make adjusting this a little bit easier because eventually this belt's going to get tight. And as it gets tighter, I will shove down on this belt, which is going to open these shivs up, and this belt's going to kind of work its way down into these shivs, and we're just going to continue to work it and go that way. So this one's got a bunch of hoses in the way, but I'm going to use my 24mm extra deep socket. JD G664 is the part number from John Deere. And electric ratchet works pretty good getting in this tight area because this one's got a bunch of hydraulic hoses in the way. Some combines you can get your half-inch gun in there and maybe run an extension through those hoses. Well, and sometimes you can get dirt on the threads and it doesn't want to go. So the M12 90-degree impact will get in there. Whew, it's only got 1 bar battery, and we'll see what happens. Okay, I've got her stretched back. You can see I started, clear down to here, and I'm clear up to there. Now, imagine we didn't have the 4 shims in here. We would be way over here. We'd be almost out of adjustment. Remember what I was talking about there? Okay, so I want my Feederhouse speed to be around 500 to 520. I like it in that range because that is a good speed that the platform's gonna cut at, right? So I'm gonna I push this back until I take a 8mm Allen, and it should fit in between the shivs, like this, okay? About an 8mm gap. It could be, you know, slightly loose in there. You definitely don't want to be a tight 8mm. Your speed will probably be like 490, 500. So just slightly loose in there, right? And then the belt up top is going to be sunk down about this far, okay? So if you do this long enough, you can actually eyeball this, and I can tell you an estimate about how fast that feeder house is going to run just based on this gap right here. So me judging by this gap, I think we're going to be hovering right around 510, 520, okay? So once we get the speed set right, our shiv gap, we're going to lock this down, okay? So you want to lock these nuts down first. So we're going to break it loose because this is actually a bolt. See, there's a bolt head in there, okay? What guys will do is they'll lock these nuts down first, and then they'll loosen these and jam this. Well, there's a little bit of gap in here to where if you do jam this last, you're going to put this in a slight little bind. And you don't want any binding in this whatsoever, okay? That causes issues, causes alignment issues. You don't want that. So we're gonna unjam this. That's why when I do this adjustment, I only loosen this first nut to where this washer can just barely spin, because I don't want to make up a lot of gap right here, okay? So now I'm gonna spread these apart, jam them into here, jam it into here, and then tighten these 3/18s, which is gonna lock that back plate up to there. So you take 230s. You got to have 230s if you're going to be a combine technician, just because of this. Okay, we're going to unjam them. I want to run this one all the way down. The threads are kind of boogered a little bit right there. I don't know what chewed on that. And also, if these threads are full of dirt and junk, make sure you clean them up before you do this. Just, it saves time. Okay, now that bolt won't turn. I can get past this bad spot. Well, I don't know what angry beaver chewed on the threads right there, but I did notice whenever I first started taking this apart that those nuts were left jammed up here. So whoever worked on it last didn't know what they were doing, but it's quite the process to get this right. So most people that do work on this, your average everyday farmers, probably not going to know what they're doing. So it's okay. That's why I'm here. I'm going to show you how it's done. I've done this job so many times, I could probably do the whole thing with my eyes closed. Guess a guy could take a thread file to that spot right there and clean it up. All right, so that's jammed. Okay. The best wrenches in the world for this job are the gear wrench, 18mm double box XL, so it's extra long, and it's got a flex, and it's 120 XP. And those get in here to these nuts and allow you to put enough torque on them to tighten them down. Work really good for this. Those are bolts in there, so sometimes the bolt head wants to turn on you. Sometimes it'll hold itself, but if it doesn't, you can take another 18mm wrench and reach up from the bottom and grab that bolt head and keep it from spinning. Got me a backup wrench. See, that gets your hand up here out of the way and gives you enough leverage to really crank down on them, because you want them tight. I like them tight. You don't want those coming loose. Now, see, two of those bolts are longer. That's because this little plate goes on there that holds the linkage to our feeder house position sensor. See this guy right here? Okay, so then I just put two nuts on there to hold that guy down. So notice I left this loose the entire time. Why do you think that is? Well, the reason why you don't want this up all the way is because that jacks up the angle on this belt, and that reduces the amount of wrap that this belt has on this lower shiv. So we want the most amount of wrap that we possibly can, which gives us more traction and will generate less heat, the more contact area we have on this belt right here. Okay, so I want this belt as flat as I possibly can. The only thing that this idler is supposed to do is to just take the bounce out of this belt. So this is the last thing that I do, is I raise this up. Just about right there. Tighten it up. See, it just got a slight raise to it. I don't want this sitting clear up here. Okay, I want it just like this. Okay, so if you ever walk up to a Feederhouse drive and this pulley's way up in the air, it's not right. Okay, it needs to be flat like this. You could physically run this Feederhouse drive without this pulley even there. It would work. This belt would kind of bounce a lot though. So that's all. The only thing this thing's here is to just keep the bounce out of the top of the belt, and it'll work just fine. So there it is. That's how you get that back together. And you want to know how to do this if you're ever going to have to change this belt up here, which happens quite frequently. So if you got to change this belt out, you got to know how to set this variable speed. Okay. And remember how I told you that this belt adjustment would be right on the money? Look at that. Perfect. Right where it needs to be. That's how you know you've done this a time or two. Okay, so I got the shields back on. The other thing that I did was I took the half links out of the conveyor chain inside. Look at all the adjustment I got now to go forward. Okay, so I already took the half links out of there, and I installed a new drive chain, and I replaced the lower guide because it was all chewed up. And I had a new apprentice with me here the last 3 days. He's not here with me today, but the first job I had him do was go underneath above the transmission and replace the shoe auger drive shaft. So our shoe auger drive right here where the slip clutch is, that shaft there, that's a lot of fun. I wanted to test to see how much grit he had, and he's got it. He's got the grit. So the reason why we replaced the shaft right here, here's the drive shaft, is the left-hand inner bearing. Left-hand inner bearing, you can see the bearing broke and came away from the lock collar and was spinning on that shaft and ate the shaft up. So when that happens, I just get a whole new shaft because I cut this one into pieces. It's just easier to cut it off right there, and then you can unbolt this bearing and take that end off, and then you can unbolt the two bearings in here, and then just pull the whole shaft out, and then we just put a new shaft in there with new bevel gears and new bearings. And I do install, see how these bearings here are the smaller bearings? I put the bearings on that you put on the shoe augers, and the races are a lot thicker on those and a little bit more heavy duty, and they'll fit on this shaft. It's a 1-inch shaft. So when I do this job, I put the front shoe auger bearings on this drive shaft to kind of beef it up a little bit, and I don't run into this issue anymore. Okay, problem solved. And when I put the drive shaft in, I leave all the bolts loose on all the bearing flanges, and I make sure that shaft's sitting there nice and straight and true, and then I lock everything down. Okay, the problem why these bearings break is because usually the shaft's in a bind and it causes that bearing to break, and then when that bearing breaks, then the shoe auger bulkhead plate can crack, and bad things can happen. Okay, so we got that shaft replaced, so that took him quite a while to get that all figured out and back in there, but it's all done. So the other thing that we did was rebuild the vertical auger gear case. So had to drop the vertical auger and the gear case down. So I've got a lot of crap kind of stacked in here, all my used stuff. but I'll show you the reason why. So this bearing here was all wallered out in the housing. See, it's just sitting in there floppy loose. So I did the old bulletproofing procedure. So if you want to know how to bulletproof one of these gear case where that problem doesn't happen anymore, I'll put a link up right here where you guys can check out that video on how to bulletproof these gear cases. Basically what I'm doing is I'm locking the outer race of this bearing to the housing because they're just slit fit bearings. So over time, the torque on that shaft just wears that housing out. That bearing gets pushed in that housing and it wallers the housing out. And then whenever this gets loose in here, then your shaft, so here's your shaft that's sitting inside there, and then it's got a gear that splines onto it. You can see the spline wear on there. And then this bevel gear that slides on that shaft will just be all floppy loose in there, which throws your backlash off, and it makes a lot of noise, and it causes a lot of vibration. And then the plate that gear case sits into will break. Usually breaks off right here. So there's a chunk missing right there. I don't know where the missing chunk went, but yeah, missing chunk there. So I did the new housing, new bearing, shaft, all that good stuff, and new charge housing plate. And I put a new auger in it too, because this one was getting pretty thin. Would it have run another year? Yeah, probably, but it would have been absolutely smoked after one more season. So we went ahead and put a new auger in there. And the splines on the top of the auger were not in very good shape either. And the customer was complaining about the unload auger. The engagement on it was really harsh, and the shear bolt was actually loose and had been bent. So I kind of dove into why it was engaging harsh, and let me show you what I think's going on. Okay, so he had actually broken all the shear bolts. There were none left. I put those in there, and there was only one left, and it was in there, and it was all bent up and loose. So, you know, part of the issue, that gear case not being right, you know, that adds a lot of excessive resistance. But I wanted to double check this engagement cylinder. This hydraulic cylinder right here pushes down on the unloaded belts. I got to put the new belts on there yet, but pushes down on those belts and then engages this jack shaft, which drives the chain, which drives your cross augers and your vertical and horizontals. Well, there is a orifice in the base end of this cylinder, right in the port. If you take that 90-degree fitting out, there is a hexagonal orifice down inside there. And sometimes I've seen that orifice be missing. So I took the fitting out and double checked that the orifice was there, and it was. So what I'm gonna do to try to help the engagement being harsh is there is a calibration to calibrate the engagement on these. So once I get belts on this and the chain back on, that'll be the next step that I do. But before we do that, there is a timing issue in between the inner and the middle auger. They are not timed correctly. I believe they're probably 20 or 30 degrees off. They're supposed to be timed 180 degrees off from each other. So that can cause the issue for breaking those shear bolts also, but it's not going to be causing the issue of this cylinder actually engaging too fast or too harshly. So I still have to fix the timing. So I'll have to pull the augers out enough to where I can get them re-splined 180 degrees apart. Stick it in the pulley and get it started. And I'll roll it around. There we go. And get it rolled around to the inside groove. Get it snuck around here. Okay, there's one. that bad boy on. Ta-da. So really, this shield here needs adjusted because it's not on there correctly. So we'll have to fix that. See how our gap's all uneven on that? And the angle on that's not right. So you got a 15 there, and then there's a 15 up there that we can loosen and try to get this shield set in place because we don't want those belts jumping off. All right, all the shields are on and adjusted properly. You know, we got enough room here where it's not pushing the belt into the pulley that's going to be spinning anytime the engine's running. And we got an equal gap all the way around here, just enough to where, you know, the belts can't jump off. So that's all done. Serpentine belt back on for the supercharger. Shield's installed. Make sure that shield gets it reinstalled in there to keep, you know, anybody from getting their fingers in there. Okay, and now I'm going to put the chain on the unloading drive. Oops. A little too hard of a whack there. Got the Williams 15/16 ratcheting wrench here. We're going the right direction. So the other things I already got done is I already leveled the concave. So it hasn't ever been leveled before. So look how far off it was. See the shiny threads? That's how far off it was. So that's leveled and recalibrated. That's all good. See, there's my new vertical gear case there and my new bevel gears. Everything's all tight and right. That thing's going to be butter smooth whenever it runs. You're not going to hear that wah 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 noise. It's just going to be ah. The other projects got going on is chopper hammers. Those are all done now. I just need to put the door back up in there. Also, we're doing spreader paddles, so the customer was complaining about it not throwing evenly in the middle. It was throwing heavy to the outsides. So we're putting angled blades on there, going from, you know, straight blades to the angled ones. That helps with that. It helps kind of even the path out to help fill in the middle and not be so heavy on the outside. So we're replacing all those discs and all the scoops on top because they're worn pretty bad there too. So you always do the tops if you do the bottoms because they use the same bolts if you're going to have that disc out. So that disc's almost done. It's just got one more to go on there. Okay, so still got to do that one. And I got the tailings elevator done, so the lower sprocket on the auger, the keyway was loosened a little bit. So if you run these tailings paddle chains loose, it'll really put a lot of wear on that keyway. So just be aware of that. So I had to take, you know, the bearings off, slide the auger back, slide the keyway out, put a new keyway in. It's still got a little bit of slop in it, but it's way better and it'll be just fine. So, and I replaced the cotter pins that go in the conveyor chain, hold the master links together. I changed those out, got S-hooks in there. Still need to put S-hooks in the clean grain elevator, but I still have to replace the drive belt. And I can't do it while it's in here because we got to have the grain tank open and there's not enough ceiling height. So I'm going to wait till we can get this combine run, take it outside, then do that belt, get the belt off, then I can spin this elevator over and get all the cotter pins replaced with S-hooks. Still got to get some shielding stuff done over here. Had that shield off there for the shoe drive shaft repair job. But all the other belts and everything seem to be adjusted on here. I still have the tailings belt loose, and I still have the rear counter shaft, well, elevator drive belt loose, but we'll get that all done when we get the clean grain done. And up top here, the coolant level can't see it in here very well. It was low, so I pressure tested it, and I got a leak on the lower radiator hose, and I tightened the clamps up on that. See my awesome heat loom that I put on the after treatment? So the loom that they use gets all tore up, and there's just bare wires showing. Mainly from the fan. There is a lot of air that comes out underneath here and hits right there and just whips it to death. And or mice chew on it. Get the loom frame, because it's like a kind of a fabric kind of loom. It's not like a hard plastic loom that's on there, so it rips and tears off real easily. So I get this heat loom from Granger, and it works really awesome, and that ain't gonna fray apart, and it's gonna handle that high temperatures. So I went ahead and I redid all the wiring, put the heat loom on there. So it's pretty cool. It wraps around the wires, and then it has like this adhesive side, and you peel the sticker off, and then it tapes together and fully seals it off. And this is really good wiring to use when, especially on like after treatment temperature modules and NOx sensors and stuff like that. It works really good on those applications, anywhere where you're running wiring in high heat situations. So it doesn't get like super hot right where this is, just on the outside of the after treatment enclosure, but it does get hot enough, and it does get a lot of wind from the fan. So this will be perfect. So it turned out really slick. And then in the engine compartment, I had to replace the charge air temperature sensor connector because of the fan. It's right there, and it's just whipping that harness, and it destroys that connector. So I put a new connector on it, and then I zip tied the lock tab down to the sensor to where it can't move, and then I took the wiring kind of back and zip tied it right here. It's already got like a hard 90 in it. See how it can still swivel? So those wires aren't under tension or anything, so this will just keep a lot of the whipping out. Okay, so that sensor and that connector won't get damaged right there. So that's taken care of. I got the spreader paddles all done. And that brings us to our next problem. I had an issue with, there's delayed hydraulic function. So anything to do with this this main hydraulic block, it's got a delay, except when you raise the Feederhouse speed, the Feederhouse speed goes super fast. Like it speeds up way too quickly. So I removed the real raise valve, and then I checked to make sure the orifice was installed, and it was there. I pulled it out, looked at it, it was all good. Put that back in, and then I went ahead and I replaced the Y1 valve. So the way this works, it's the main hydraulic pump is a fixed displacement pump, so that means that it's always pumping, right? So oil comes in here and then goes out the bottom, goes back to return, completes the open loop system, right? Well, when we engage a hydraulic function, this dump valve, the Y1 valve, has to activate, which closes this path off to return, and then another valve will open whatever function that you have, and then the hydraulic pressure will go out the desired hose. See on this chart where it says S3 and S1, well, the S1, that one right there, is your Y1 dump valve. They just call it S1 on this chart. But anyway, see how S1 is activated with every function except for threshing speed decrease. So threshing speed decrease, that allows that oil to retract from the separator drive piston into the return flow and slow the rotor down. So every single function has to require that S1 and then one of these other valves, right? So I was thinking maybe there was something wrong with this dump valve, so I replaced the dump valve. I know we have a real orifice in here because it uses the real raise circuit for the Feederhouse speed. Okay, so hopefully this thing will work correctly when I get it back running again, but we'll just have to wait and see. So pressure comes, for the Feederhouse speed, pressure comes in through here. The Y1 closes, the reel raise activates, oil goes through the raise, goes through the lower, goes out this hose, but it also goes through a orifice right there for a pressure drop. Comes out that hose. And then it comes to the multi-coupler on this hose right here, and then this fitting right here is actually, it's hard to see. It's right in here. This part of the fitting right here is a filtered orifice fitting. Okay, so pressure actually comes into the control, the multi-coupler, and then it comes out this filtered orifice into this hose right here, and then goes through this hose and then into the piston, and then that piston squeezes these shivs together and the Feederhouse speed goes. But whenever you go to speed it up, you push the button, there's a slight delay, which there shouldn't be, and then all of a sudden this shiv goes whoop, like super quick. Never seen that before. If you guys have seen that before, let me know. I'm not really sure what I'm going to get into on this one, but there really isn't a whole lot involved in that circuit, right? There's 3 solenoids, you know, the valve block itself, an orifice, that filtered orifice, a hose, a hydraulic piston. I mean, that's it hydraulically. So, but it's time to pack up the tools, head back. I've been driving an hour back and forth from this place to the shop, so I kind of got to leave a little early in the afternoon to get back on time. So I'm going to pack up my tools and be back in the morning. All right, so we're back here this morning. I brought my little man lift to go on the forklift so I could get up to the unload augers. I took the boot off, slid the outer auger out, and then unbolted the middle auger and slid it off the spline. Now I'm working inside of this hole right here. Let me show you how far off that was. All right, so the timing on this was way off. This has never been messed with before. This is how it was from factory. So all I did, I slid this straight off of there. See, we have our flatting right here. Well, the end of that flatting is supposed to be 180 degrees off from that one. Yeah. So this was supposed to be timed clear over here, pointing this way. And it's clear over there. So when you have your timing off, that will break those shear bolts on the unloading auger drive when that timing's not right, because then you have a bad spot right here where this auger can't grab what this one's throwing. So they got to be timed 180 off. So I'll get that thing spun around and try to get it re-splined back up, and then I'll re-bolt this one, and then I'll slide the outer in proper timed and get it bolted on the end and put the boot back on, and then I'll be done with the auger. There we go, that's better. So I'll line up this edge with that edge right here. So this middle auger, it kind of has the same kind of hockey stick looking end that the beginning of the inner auger does. And whenever you're timing the horizontal and the vertical, you're 90 degrees from each other. So this would be pointing straight down in the tube, and then your vertical auger would be sitting like this, parallel with the arm of the gear case in there. So yeah, this is the way I've timed them a million times, and I've never had a problem. But the other end right here, it has, like, the flighting looks more like this on both augers, so it's a little easier to eyeball that auger than this one. The middle and the outer are now splined to perfection. I like it. And it's all done. Man, it was hot up there in the ceiling. All right, so here we're putting on the Sloan Express supports for the grain tank covers. And these are really good for putting on these covers to prevent them from cracking, because if you put a bend extension on these, it will make them crack because of the width of the hinges are not wide enough, and all the pressure on top of the cover will eventually crack the fiberglass in the panel. So I install these plates from Sloan Express to help them from cracking out. You got to use longer bolts when you put these in. And there's a 13 millimeter down there that you're supposed to take out, and take out these two M10 carriage bolts, and then you can pull that out and put the plate in, and then fish your longer carriage bolts back through, and then put your 13 millimeter bolt back in right there. And you can see the difference in length for the new bolts. And here's the part number. 03M7194 is the John Deere part number for the bolts that you'll need to put those plates in. And you can see here how much longer they are. And now I just got to put one on the support on the other side, and then I'll do the same thing to the front panel. And I got the front ones done. So the front panels were the ones that were starting to crack. So it's a good thing we put these supports on here, and that helps save that panel, because those aren't cheap if you got to replace them. Now we're in the grain tank in the hot sun. It's about 92 degrees outside. The only thing keeping me alive is my little Milwaukee fan. And I got the shields off here. We ran a new clean grain elevator drive belt. So now we just got to get all the shields and the cover and everything back in. Okay, so I got all the belts on it, and then I took it out and ran it. And everything runs great now. The only problem is the Feederhouse speed is it increases and decreases too fast. So check how fast this thing goes up and down. Yeah, so way too fast. There's one more orifice that I'm going to dive into, but I'm going to order the real raise valve, the lower valve, the relief valve, and then I'm going to order the orifice that's on the multi-coupler, on the back of the multi-coupler too. And I'm just going to have all those parts the next time that I'm here, and I'll address that whenever I get back. Hopefully, right now it's Friday. I MD the parts, so machine down the parts. I should have everything on Monday morning. So hopefully I get everything in Monday morning. I'll come back here and dive into it. But that's going to be it for this video, because it's already too long the way it is. So I'll keep you guys updated whenever I get this thing fixed. I'll let you know what I found on that. But I appreciate you guys watching. Like and subscribe to the channel. And until next time, keep that green iron moving.